Welcome to my first lesson on my React crash course, and in this video we're going to be setting up React, going over the very basics, so a few files here, and you're actually going to inject your first React code into an HTML file, which is a pretty cool thing. And before we actually begin, make sure they like this video, subscribe, comment down below if you have any questions during the video. And so the first thing that you're going to want to do is search up react.dev and open this website, and this website was built by React. So if we scroll down here, we can see the very basics of React and how this stuff works. But we're going to scroll to the very top and click on the Learn React button. And here we're going to see the quick start. And if we scroll down, we're going to see how we can create a nest component. So here we have a function which will return a button. And at the very bottom here, we can see that this function, my button, is going to be nested in another component. So over here, and now we can see this as an example a lot better. So here we can actually change this to something different. We can change this to maybe an H2, and then also here, and now we can see that now it's going to be changed into an H2, and you can obviously change to whatever you want. But basically here we create a function which is called my button, and then we're returning an H2. There's multiple ways in which we can do this, but I'm not going to go over them right now because we're going to be setting up React. So let's actually go to the installation, and then let's go to the start new React project. And here we can see that we will need Node.js to install it. So let's go ahead and open a new tab and search up Node.js. Click on the first link over here, and we're going to download the LTS version because it's going to be the most stable one. So let's go ahead and click on it, wait for it to download. Once it downloads, open it, and now we're going to click on next. Press on the box here to accept, and then keep pressing on next until you get to install. And now we have to wait for Node.js to install into our system. And once you see this, that means that it's downloaded, and we can open our command prompt. So you can press on star or Windows and search up CMD or command prompt, and you should see this open up. Don't worry, we're not going to be installing any viruses or anything like that, because all that we're going to do right now is make sure that we have Node.js downloaded by writing node -- version. And we can see that it's going to output the version of my current Node.js. Yours might be different, but make sure that it's going to be the latest stable version. And if you don't get the version and something else like errors or stuff like that, then make sure that you go back and then download Node.js the right way. So copy me, and hopefully that works. And once we're done with that, we can start a new React project because we've installed Node.js, which also installed npm to our system, which is used to download JavaScript packages from the Node package manager. But if we scroll down over here, we're going to use this command to start our React project. But here it's not npm, but it's npx. And it's a bit different because it's used to execute JavaScript packages instead of downloading them. And so now that we know the differences between npm and npx, we can go ahead and actually copy this. And once we're done with that, you're going to want to go and open the path where you want to start your React app. And I'm going to warn you that it's going to actually create a new folder in the path that you're currently going to be at. So it's going to look something like this. We're going to be in this folder. It's going to create another folder, and then inside of that folder is where all of the components from React are going to be. But now let's actually create it. So we're going to right click and then press on open in terminal. I'm going to move it here, and we're going to write the command npx create react app at latest, and then here's where you're going to name it. So I'm just going to name it app name, and when I press on enter, we can see that it's going to start executing and installing all of the packages that I'm going to need for React. And for you, you're probably going to need to press on Y and then enter to accept whatever it's going to say here. But now all they're going to need to do is wait until it's done installing, and it should look something like this. And if yours is not done yet, then you can obviously press on pause and then wait for that to be done installing. But if it is, then go ahead and open VS Code. So there it is. And if you're actually inside of a project, which I'm not, then you're going to go ahead and press on file and then close folder, and then it should look something like this. And all that we're going to do now is actually just drag and drop it. So I'm going to drag the app name and drop it in VS Code, and now we can see all of the files here. And if you've seen my Chrome extensions crash course, then you know what the JSON file is for. And so the package.json file is, if you don't know, is going to be all of the information about our React app. So here we have the name, the version, dependencies, scripts, and so on. And so this is going to be a pretty important chunk of information, because if we actually go to view terminal, and so what we're going to do is actually write npm and then start from here. So if we write npm start, it's actually going to run all of this. So it's basically a shortcut. So if we write npm start, we're going to see it actually start a React app. So let's wait. And there it is. So this is going to be the template for the React app that we just made. And let's actually make this smaller. I'm going to put this in here. And so there it is. And we can actually also write build, test, and inject, but I'm not going to go over this right now. I'm going to go over this later. And let's actually take a look at some of the stuff here. So the source, this is where all of our stuff is. The README is just some information, so we can see the npm start. That's what we just ran, and it's going to start our project. Here it's going to say the URL. It's going to be at port 8000, and then there's a bunch of different stuff here, but we can actually close this now. And let's go to the app.js. And so here is where our React is. If we actually change something, so let's change the paragraph here to an H1, and let's write something. So hello React, or I don't know, something random. And then if we save this, we can see that now it's going to reload, and then now it's going to say hello React. And this actually may seem pretty weird because it's a JavaScript file, but that's the cool thing about React, which allows us to actually return HTML code. And if we actually take a look here, we can see that it's pretty weird because we have HTML code in a JavaScript file, and that's the pretty cool thing about React. So it allows us to do things like that. And so if your npm doesn't work, or you have errors or anything like that, then what you're going to want to do is go back to your downloads and then press on it again, and then the setup wizard should come up again. And we can see that I do have it installed, but you can actually press on repair to reinstall it again or install anything that's missing. So I'm going to go ahead and press on repair. And if I press on repair again here, it's going to repair the Node.js, install everything missing, and then after that, everything should work again. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually go over most of these files and then delete some of them, so files that we don't even need. Let's start with the app.css, and here we're just going to have styles that are going to be added to the app.js, and the main JS file here is going to be the index.js. And so in here we can see that we're going to be rendering app, and so we're importing app from app.js, which is going to be here. And it's basically a function which is going to return all of these elements. And this is how all this works. And what you can do is you can actually just copy this, go to index.js, and then just paste it in here, and it's still going to work the exact same way. So let's actually go to view terminal, and we're going to run npm start. And when it starts, it should open up a new tab, and we can see that we get an error, so logo is not defined. And to actually define it, let's go back here. I'm going to copy this, paste it in here, and now when we actually go back, we can see that it also works. And so the reason that the app.js file here exists is so that the index.js file wouldn't be too long. And so we can also do different CSS classes. So we can add a CSS class to the app.js and then also one for the index.js. And so what's going to happen is that these two CSS files are still going to be added to index.html, but it's just another way to make this project cleaner. And there's also different reasons, but I'm not going to go over them right now. So we can just go ahead and delete these two CSS files. Let's also delete the app.js, and we're actually going to be doing the same thing later on. So we're going to be creating different files so that our index.js file wouldn't be too long, but we're not really worried about that right now because all that we're doing right now is learning React. So let's go ahead and delete the import app and then also logo, because we're going to delete that too. So now we can save this, delete the logo SVG, and then also these two right here, and then we can also delete the app.test.js. And once we're done cleaning all of that up, we can go ahead and also delete the report web vitals, delete that, and then also the import for that. We can delete that too. And if you want to, you can go to public and delete all of these logos and favicon too. And this could be your template for creating React projects. So you can go ahead and save that too. But if you're not going to do that, then we're actually going to delete the source and do all of that from scratch, because I want you guys to know how you can create the index.js file and all of the other files that we're going to need from scratch so that you have that basic knowledge. So let's go ahead and create the source file. Let's make the index.js file. And so now we're going to import all of the things that we're going to need. So we're going to start by importing React from React. and it should look like this. The second one is going to be import React DOM. So DOM is going to be capitalized, and then also the R from React is also going to be capitalized. And we're going to import this from React DOM and then client. And this is all that we're going to need for the imports right now. And now we're going to actually go ahead and make a variable of the root right here that we have in our HTML file. So to do that, we're going to write const root, and that's going to be equal to React DOM dot create root. And you can use document.querySelector, or you can use document.getElementById, which is what I'm going to use. So document.getElementById doesn't really matter as long as you're actually selecting the element. So here I'm going to write root, and like I said before, we're going to be finding this div right here. And in this div, we're going to be injecting all of the code from our React. So now that we've created the root, we're going to go ahead and render a function. So let's write root.render. And then in here, we're going to render a function. So let's go above here. And here we're going to make a function where we're going to return an HTML div with multiple elements. But first, we're just going to return, let's say, an h1. And so you can either write a normal function or an error function. So you could either do function, my function, or actually capitalize this, and then do something like this, or you can write const my function and then do an arrow function like this. Doesn't really matter. I'm gonna do an arrow function, and then let's actually change this to first function and make sure that the first letter is capitalized, because it's not gonna work if it's not. And then in here we're gonna return an h1. So I'm gonna write h1 like this. Here we're gonna write first React element. And so there's one more thing left to do. We have to render this function in here. So let's go ahead and do that. First function. And now if we write npm start in here, wait for the tab to open, we can see our first React element appear. Let's go ahead and open developer console by right clicking and pressing on inspect, or using the shortcut, which is going to be Control Shift and I. And here if we go to the root, we can see that we have an h1, but if we go to the index.html file, we can see that we don't have any elements other than the div over here. So we can see that we've actually returned this HTML element, and if everything worked, then congratulations. But if not, then make sure that you copied everything correctly and you didn't make any mistakes. But now let's actually go over how we can return multiple elements, because if we actually try doing something like, let me put this in brackets here. So if we try returning another element, so let's try returning an h2, we can see that we get an error. And if I save, we can see that we have 2 errors. So that means that we can do that. And that's because you can't be returning more than one thing at a time. So one thing that we can do is we can return one element with multiple elements inside of it. And if you haven't guessed already, it's a div. So if we actually put a div in here, we can write as many elements as we want in here. So h1, let's make a paragraph, so p, and then in here we're just gonna write p, and so on. Let's go back in here, and now we can see that, let me actually zoom in, we have multiple elements in here, and that's because we put all of them in our div. And because we can actually return a function as an element, because here we're actually calling this function which returns elements, we can do the same thing in here. So let's go ahead and actually rename this function to something like video list, and then here we're going to do the same. So I'm going to write video list here and also in here. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to show you what happens if we try returning a function with the first letter being lowercase. So let's save this, and we can see that we get a warning. So we can see that it says video list is assigned a value but never used. That's because you're not allowed to return a function as an element in React when it's lowercase. And so we can see that it's going to return this element called video list that doesn't even exist. So that's one thing that you should be aware of. So let's go back to when it's capitalized. Let's delete all of this in here. And that's because what we're going to do now is we're going to make another function. So const video. And that's going to be equal to another function. And so in here, we're going to return a div. And in this div, we're going to have multiple elements. So we're going to have the image, we're going to have an H1, or let's actually make this an H2. Let's add a paragraph, and then we could also add different elements later on. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to make a basic clone of YouTube, and we obviously going to need an image, a title, and a paragraph, and then we're going to be adding maybe buttons and so on later on. That doesn't really matter right now because we're just going to be trying different things. So the cool thing about this here is that we can actually return as many videos as we want in the video list. So let's actually just write something in the H2. I'm just going to write video title, and then in the paragraph I'm going to write video description. And I'm actually going to go to my channel, and in here what we're going to do is we're just going to copy one of the thumbnails. So let's say I'm going to just copy this one. You're going to go to inspect, we're going to select it, I'm going to move it here. There is going to be the image, so I'm just going to copy the URL here. Hopefully it works. I'm just going to actually do this. So copy image address. I'm going to go back to VS Code, paste it in here. I'm just going to write video thumbnail. And now we're going to go to the return in the video list, and we're going to return the video just like we did in here. So we're going to write video. And now if we go back in here, we can see that we're going to have an image, the video title, and then the video description. And so we can see that we've returned the video. Now, if we actually put this inside of a div or an element, doesn't really matter right now. So let's just put in a div. We can work on everything else later. We can actually copy and paste this multiple times, and we can see that we're going to have multiple videos show up. And so that's actually the cool thing about React, and I realized that I spelled this wrong, so that is my bad. Let's fix that. There we go. So all of that fixed in here. But yeah, so the thing is here that we're creating a function video which returns a div with multiple elements, and then in the video list function in here, we're actually returning a div with the video function that we have in here, which returns all of this. And that's basically what allows us to make multiple videos. And what we're going to be able to do later on is actually manipulate every single object in here. And what I mean by that is we're going to be able to set a certain source for every single video, so it's going to have a different image. So in here we have 4 videos, but if I actually go here, we can see that it has the same thumbnail and the same video title and description, but later on we're going to be able to change that to a specific title and description, so they're all going to have different text and images. Now we know the basics of how we can inject HTML through React. Let's go ahead and go over classes, IDs, styles, and things like that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do to add a class is obviously find the element where you want to add the class. So let's go ahead to our video list, go to the div where all of our videos are going to be, and let's add a class of video list so that we can style it later on. So in HTML, to add a class, so let's go here. All that you would need to do is find the element and then write class, and then here you would write the class. But the difference in React is that you would have to write class name instead of class. So here you can see that if I write class, it's going to say class name as a suggestion. And then here you would write the name of the class. So in my case, it's going to be video list. And now let's take a look in console here to make sure that we have no errors. And we can see that we have none. And I'm going to actually go into the div here, and we can see that we do have a class of video list, and it says class here. But what if I change this just to class like this? We can see that it's still going to have a class of video list, but if we go to the console, we're going to get an error. So we can see that it says invalid DOM property class, did you mean class name? So we can see that it does have to be class name. And for IDs, it's going to be the same thing. So if I write ID in here, and then let's just do the same thing. So video list, no errors. And if we go to our elements, and we can see that it works, so that's fine. I'm going to keep it at class video list, and then we're going to go back to our video. I'm going to do the same thing here. So class name, and then this is going to be video. And then when we save, we can see that each video is going to have a class of video, and then our container of all of our videos is going to have a class of video list. And so let's say that we wanted to add styles attribute to our element. So in HTML, all that we'd have to do is write style, and then let's say change the color here to blue. We can see that now the color changed to blue. But in React, it's going to be a bit different because let's go to our video. And if I write styles in here, we can see that it's going to add the curly brackets automatically. And that's because when we use curly brackets in React and JavaScript, what they're going to do is it's going to let us bring JavaScript logic and variables to wherever we add the curly brackets to. So let's say in here, I'm going to go and make a variable, let's say color, right? Now color is going to be equal to color, and then, or actually, this is going to be styles. And then in styles, we're going to set color to blue, and then blue has to be text. What we could do is actually we could put styles in here, and then we can see that now the text is going to change to blue. And we can keep adding different things. So let's say that we wanted to change the background maybe to something, so we could write background, and then let's actually set that to something dark. We can see that now it's going to change to dark. And so let's actually also change the color. So let's do let's change it to white, and there it is. So that's one way to do it. And if you actually wanted to write the styles in here instead of making a variable, what you would have to do is you would have to actually add another set of curly brackets, just like we did in the object, and then in here you'd have to write the styles. So let's go back to blue, and now we can see that it's going to change the text to blue. And there's a lot of ways in which we can do this kind of stuff. So let's say if we set color to equal to red, and then we pass it here, so color, we can see that now the text is going to be red. And so that's another way to do it. And I'm not really going to go too much in depth because it's not really the best practice to use style in React like this, because we have a CSS file, which we haven't actually created yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So go to your source, and then we're going to name this index.css. So we know that this CSS file is going to be related to the index.js. And we actually need to import the CSS file in here, because if we go in our CSS file, and let's go ahead and actually select something. So let's select the video list. We're going to use the class video list. Let's set the color to white, so we shouldn't see the text here. We can see that it doesn't work because we have to import it. So to do that, we're going to write import and then index.css, and that didn't work, so let's do that, index.css, and now we can see that the text changed to white, which means that it works. So I'm going to go ahead and actually delete this for now. And what we need is we need to change the text here, and we're going to add some styles. So if we go to YouTube, we can see that we have an image, and then we have the title, we have the name of the channel, and then views, and then the amount of days that passed since the video has been uploaded. So let's go ahead and actually make a container, which is going to be a container for the text. And I'm going to name it video content. And in here, we're going to put the title. And then the paragraph is going to be the channel name. So I'm going to change that to channel name. And then under that, we're going to have a span, which is going to have the number of views. So let's do views. And then we're going to need to use the dot. So one way to copy it is by going to inspect and then selecting the dot, which should be a before, as we can see over here. Let's open this, and there it is. So you can copy the content and then put this after views. And then let's write 0 days ago. And then later on, we're going to be able to set every single one of these elements to something different, which is probably going to be the next video, so make sure that you check that out. And so now that we have this done, we need to add the picture of the YouTube channel. So I'm just going to go ahead and write image, and just for now I'm going to use this image, and then we're going to be changing that later on too. So let's go ahead and press on copy image address, and then I'm going to put it in here. And if I save now, we can see that we have the thumbnail, the picture of the YouTube channel, title, channel name, and then the views and then days. And now let's actually go ahead and style this and make it look a lot nicer. And so there's one more class that we need to add, and it's going to be the thumbnail class. So I'm going to go to the thumbnail image and add a class name of thumbnail. I actually already made some styles, so I'm going to go ahead and copy them. And I'm not going to go over them because this is not going to be a CSS crash course. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste it. And if you want these styles, then you can go ahead and go to the description down below, find the GitHub repository, click on the third lesson, and then you're going to see this whole project that I made here, and then you can go ahead and copy the CSS file. And now we can see that we're gonna have the videos, and it's not gonna look the exact same as YouTube, because I don't want to spend too much time on CSS because it doesn't really matter right now. And so in the next lesson, I'm going to teach you how we can manipulate every single element here. In this video, I'm going to be going over props. So by the end of this video, every single video element is going to have a different thumbnail, different title, so on. And so for those of you who don't know what props are, they're basically variables. So for example, for the thumbnail here, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to put the prop here, and then every single video is going to have a different thumbnail. But first, what we need to do is actually make variables for every single element that we're going to want to change. So we're going to want to have a variable for the thumbnail, the logo of the YouTube channel, the video title, channel name, and then these two right here. So the views and then the amount of days it's been since the video has been uploaded. So we can obviously make an object and then put all of that inside of it, but we're going to do that later. So we can start with the thumbnail, and then we're going to set that to equal to the exact same thing right here. Let's try and actually put the thumbnail now inside of the source. And to do that, we're actually going to need to delete all of this. And then after the equal sign, we're going to have to use the curly brackets. And then in here, if we write thumbnail and save, we can see that nothing has changed. So that means that it works. And now we're going to do the exact same thing for our other elements. So I'm going to copy this right here. And so I'm going to write const logo. Doesn't really matter. You can set this to whatever you want, but make sure that you know what it is. And then we're going to change that in here too. So logo. Now for the title of the video. So let's do const title. I'm just going to copy this. So video title, paste that in here. We're going to have two more. So one is going to be the amount of views. So let's do views, set that to 0. So we did views, and now we have to do days. And for this one, we're actually going to need 2. But actually, let's not worry about this right now. We can do that later. But to actually put these variables inside of the text elements, all that we're going to need to do is actually, we can just delete the text. And then we just need to use the curly brackets, and then we're going to write the name of the variable. So this is going to be title, and then this is going to be the channel name. Forgot to do that. So const channel and then name. I'm going to copy this. So channel name, paste that in here, and then here we're going to write channel name. And before we move on any further, we can go back into here to make sure that everything looks the exact same, and it does. But if it doesn't for you, then make sure that you copied everything for me and you have no misspellings or any errors. But now I'm gonna actually go over how we can pass values through our function. So let's say that I wanted to have a special title, or for every single video. What I could do is I could pass in the title here, and now if we go back into here, we can see that we get a bunch of errors. So that's because when we're calling the function, we should be setting the title to actually equal to something. And we can see that over here, we're calling the function as an element because we're returning this HTML elements. But we have to pass in this title somehow. So to do that, what we're actually going to have to do is we're going to have to write title and then set that to equal to something. Now, if we set this to equal to title, so the title that we have here, this variable, and go back, we can see that we have nothing. So let's go ahead and actually console log title and see what we're getting. So let's go to the console, and we're getting a bunch of errors, but we're getting an object here. So at the very top, we can see that we're getting an object, and then inside of the object, we're actually getting the title. So in here, what we could do is we could actually add the round brackets, and if we go back now, we can see that we're just getting the video title. And that's because we're actually getting the title from the object. So let's see what happens if we just set this to equal to text right here instead of a JavaScript object. So let's go back to title, go up. We can see that it's going to be the exact same thing. So we're still going to need to add the curly brackets to get our test in here. Now let's add a title to every single video. So I'm just going to do that. This one is going to be test. So the title here is going to be, let's just do title 1, or you could do video 1, doesn't really matter. This is going to be title 1. This is going to be 2. We're going to change that later on. So this is going to be 2. Copy both of them. This is going to be 3, and this one is going to be 4. And now we can see that every single video now is going to have a different title. And we can obviously do it for every other element, so we can change the thumbnail and other stuff here. But if we do it for every single element, then it's going to be very long. So let's say we also had the thumbnail here, or let's just do the channel name because I don't want to pass in a URL just yet. So let's try the channel name, and then let's also do the views. And so now we're actually going to have to go to every single video here and then do channel name is going to be equal to the name of the channel. So let's do channel 1, or actually, I don't know why I'm passing it like this. So channel 1, we're going to have to copy this, paste it to every single other element that we have here. And then same goes for views. So views, right, we can do we can say that this one has 5 views, or I press on 6, so this one's going to have 6. So this one's going to have 4. We can do 655 and so on. I forgot the S, but now we can see that the views also work. And we can see that this is going to be very long, so it's not the best way to do all of this. So we can see that every single video is going to have multiple props in here, when what we could do is we could just pass in one prop by putting all of the information that we want into an object. So we can do something like this. Let's just say props, and then that's going to be equal to this. And then here we can set the title, right, to equal to something and so on. But for that, we're actually going to need to have an actual object. So let's turn all of this into an object. So let's go ahead and make that object. I'm going to call it video, and that's going to be this. So the thumbnail is going to be equal to thumbnail, and this obviously has to be in object format. So copy this, paste this in here. So let's do views 2, and that's just 0. Now we can delete all of this, and I think I deleted the actual object by accident. So we can do that now. And we can go in here, and now we can pass in props, and then that's going to be equal to video, like this. And now let's delete these 2, or the other 3, and then let's copy and paste and add 3 more video elements. And now in here, we have to change this to props, and let's see what's that going to look like. So if we go here now, we're obviously going to get an error. But if we go to the very top, we can see that we have props, and then we have props inside of it with all of the stuff. So let's actually do that, and now we should just get props. Okay, there we go. So we have all of our elements in here now, like that. And to actually access them, we're gonna have to write props.thumbnail and all of the above. So I'm just gonna paste that in here. And now we can see that we get all of our videos back. So what we could do is actually have multiple videos. So let's say this one is going to be video 2. Thumbnail, we can keep that the same. Logo the same too. Let's just say this was going to be video title 2, channel name 2. And let's set the views here to actually a number. Let's do the exact same thing here. And here we can pass in video 2. And we can see that now we're going to have a different title here. Same goes for the channel name and then the views. And that's honestly the very basics of how you can manipulate all of these values here. But there's a lot of ways to do this. So actually, I'm going to go over something before we do that. So another way to actually put the video in here. So instead of writing props, what we can do is we can delete that. And then if we write ... in here, it's going to do basically the exact same thing. So let's remove this, write props, and then here let's console log props again and see what we get. So we can see that we're going to get the exact same thing, but we don't have to write the curly brackets now. And it's going to look a lot better now because we don't actually have to write props and then do all of this stuff. So let's actually change all of this to the other option. Let's just have 2 videos right now. So delete the props, add 3 dots in here, and let's add another one so that we have a full line. Full line is actually 4, so there we go. Let's delete the console log from here. And now a way to make this simpler, so instead of writing props.thumbnail, right, what we can do is we can do something like this. So const, we're going to get all of the values from video. We can get the thumbnail, And then we can also get the logo and then also views. So views, and this is going to actually be equal to props. And if we delete the props from here, so let's go ahead and do that. And if we go back, hold up, I think I spelled it wrong. There we go. And we can see that it works the exact same way, but now we don't have to actually write props, dots, and then the name of the variable. And there's actually another way to make this even simpler. So we can just copy this and paste it in here. And if we actually comment this out, then we can see that it still works. So I just showed you 3 different ways in which we can do this. You can obviously do it however you want to. And so the last thing that's left to do is make a few more videos and then change the thumbnails and then the logos to different URLs so that they're actually, we can actually see that it's different videos. So let's actually go ahead and do that. I'm going to go and open my YouTube channel, and I'm just going to be copying, I'm going to copy the logo. So, and I'm actually going to have all of the channel logos be equal to the exact same thing because I want all of the videos to be videos for my channel. And let's just check that it works. So there it is. So copy this and then paste that in there. And so now we can see that it's going to have the same logos. We have to fix this. So this is going to be video 1, 2, 3, and then also 4. There we go. Now we can see that every single video is different, and we can change the views, and that's going to be the last thing, I'm pretty sure. I'm just going to set this to something random. So let's do that. Let's do this. And then the last one, I'm just going to do, let's say 1.4 million for fun. Now it has to be a string, but there we go. So 1.4 million views. And you can obviously copy this and then paste it again and then maybe flip it. So we can do 4, 3, 2, 1 so that it looks like this. And so we can see that it looks very nice, but there's just one more thing left to do. So we have to go and add a border radius to here. So line 26, border radius, and I'm going to set this to, I'm just going to do 50%. You can change that to whatever you want, but now it's going to be circle. And yeah, so this is going to be for this video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. And in the next video, I'm going to be going over how we can remove all of this. So all of this stuff and put that in another JavaScript file and then actually make it all out nicer. And we can actually delete the days because I'm not going to be doing anything with it. So I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to be going over how to clean up your code. So we're going to be creating a file called data.js. And in our index JavaScript file, we can see how much cleaner our code looks. And I'm going to go over the map method too. And so now I'm going to talk about how to get rid of all of these objects and how we can clean all of this up by using a method called map. And it's very similar to the for each method. But now let's see how to get rid of all of this right here. So let's go to our source and make a file called data.js if you don't already have it. And in there, what we're going to do is we're going to write const and let's name it videos. And that's going to be equal to an object. And so in this object, what we're going to have is we're going to have arrays. So each array is going to have a video. So now we can put that in here. Let's fix all of this stuff. So this is what it's going to look like. And so basically we're going to have multiple objects. So each object is going to be our video. So we can just copy and paste our objects from there without their name. So let's do that. Now I'm going to copy this one. I'm going to copy it with the brackets and make sure that you add a comma. Add some space in there. And then we have one more. So let's go ahead and do that. Add a comma. And I forgot about the brackets. So I'm just going to add them. And so now that we have this array with each object being a video, what we're going to do is we're going to export this. So we're going to write export and then we have the array here. And what we're going to have to do is let's actually delete all of this first. So let's do that. I'm going to comment all of this out. And we're going to have to import the data from, or the videos from our data. So I'm going to do export videos from, and then we're going to have to write data like this. And before we move on to the map method, I'm going to explain to you how all of this works. So let's go to our data.js. So what we did is we created a new file, a new JavaScript file, and in here we have a variable called videos, which is going to be an array. And so in this array, what's happening is we have 4 different objects. And so every single object has the same variables, but different values. So we can see that every object here is going to have a thumbnail, a logo, a title, a channel name, and also views. But the only difference is going to be the values. So we can see that every single thumbnail here is going to be different. The logo for the YouTube channel is going to be the same in my case, but you get the point. So this is basically just an array of objects. And what's happening here is we're exporting this array, which means that we're going to be able to use this array outside of this file. So in our index.js, we're importing videos, which is going to be the name of our variable here. So we're exporting videos from our file here. And let's say that I rename this to something else now. So I didn't like videos and I want it to be video now. Let's actually do that. I'm going to console log this real quick. So console log videos. We can see that we're going to get all of our videos here, but if I change this to something else like video and save, we can see that we get an error because here we're exporting a variable called video, and here we're trying to import a variable called videos, which doesn't actually exist in our file here. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. I'm going to change this back to videos. And so now that we're done with that, let's take a look at how we can fix this. So when we console logging videos, we know that it's an array, which means that if I do something like this, we're going to get the third object. So what we can do is we can use the for each method. But in React, we use a method called map, which is a lot nicer because what it does is actually it creates a copy of the array. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like when we write it. We have to use the curly brackets because this is going to be JavaScript inside of our HTML here. So let's go ahead and use that method. I'm going to write videos dot map. We're going to use the round brackets, and then this here we're going to name every single video. So I'm just going to name this video, and then here I'm going to use the arrow function, and let's just console log video for now. So console.log and then video. And now we can see that we're going to get a console log for every single video. But now what we can do is we can actually return a video. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to return a video element. And here all that we're going to do is we're going to pass in our video. And this should work now. And it doesn't work because I forgot to return that. So we're going to return it. And now we're going to get all of our videos. So let's actually open this like that. And we can see that we have 4 videos now. So now we can delete all of this. And I'm going to actually just do this. And now we finally clean this code up and it looks a lot nicer. And if you do want to add more videos, what you can do is go back to your data.js file. And then you could just copy and paste another one here. So copy and paste. You're going to have to change the thumbnail obviously and everything else. But if I save it now, we can see that we're going to have 2 of these videos because I copied it. And now we can see that everything looks the exact same way, but in our code, it's a lot nicer and it's so much easier to read and actually work around here, which is why I made a separate video on how to clean up your code. It's really important to know how to do that. But what I'm going to go over in the next video is how we can add event listeners. So every time we're going to click a video, the views are going to increase. And before I go over UseState, I'm going to have to go over event listeners because we're going to add the UseState inside of the event listener and it's not going to take too long. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we know there's 2 ways to add event listeners. One is going to be from your JavaScript file and then the other one's going to be from your HTML file. So let's go ahead and actually open our index.html, or actually I'm going to do that. You don't have to do it. But inside of the body here, let's say we had a button. We know that if we wanted to, what we could do is we could write on click, and then here we would write the name of the function, and that's how we do it in HTML. But in JavaScript, we would select the element and then we would add the event listener. But in React, we do it the HTML way because it's much shorter and it's a lot better, since what we could do to add the event listener to our video, we would go here and in HTML, we would write on click like this. But since it's still JavaScript, we have to write on click with the C being capitalized, and it's going to be the same way with other event listeners. So just like class name here, it's the same way with event listeners and all of the other attributes. So let's say we want to do on change, we could see that the C is going to be capitalized too in here. I'm going to go back to on click, and here we can see that we can actually make a callback function. So let's actually alert title and see if that works. So when we click a video, we can see that we get an alert with the title here. And the other way to do is actually just to create a separate function. And usually the way you would name it is this one's going to be on click. So you would write handle and then click. You'd usually write the event here, and then we can console log e.target, and then let's just console log the element. And now we can write the name of the function inside of our onClick attribute here and open the console here. And we click an element, we can see that we're going to get the thumbnail since we clicked the thumbnail. And let's say I click the video title now, we're going to get the video title, and hopefully you get the point now. And so I'm not going to go too much in depth because you should already know them, but on click and on change are the main event listeners that you could use. On change is for inputs, so every time you write something, it's gonna run the callback function, but this is not gonna be an input, so I'm gonna change it back to on click. And let's go over UseState. You have to import it, so go to the very top and write import UseState, and then you can press enter and it's gonna finish it for you. But UseState allows us to have a value in a function, which is gonna change that value to whatever you want. So let's actually create it, and then it should make a bit more sense. So the first value is gonna be the state. So actually, I'm just gonna write state here. And then the second value is gonna be the function that's gonna set the state. So you would write set state, and then that's gonna be equal to UseState. And then here we would write the value. Let's actually put this inside of the video list, and then we're going to put it in the video later. So now we're going to have two values. The first one is going to be state. The second one is going to be UseState. In the return function, what we're going to do is we're going to write h1, and then let's set the text to be equal to state. And then in the round brackets where we set our UseState, we could set the value of state here and see what that's going to look like. So let's just write videos. And once we save, we can see that we're going to get an H1 that says videos here. And what we could do is, let's say on click. So when we click our video list here, we could write on click. Let's actually make a function here. So const handle click, and then that's going to be equal to an arrow function. And so in here, we're going to set state. So that's a function which is going to change state, whatever we write in here. And so once we click it, we're going to set state to equal to React videos, or you could set that to whatever you want. And now we're actually going to put the handle click inside of our onClick attribute here. And once we click it, we can see that our text is going to change to React videos. And so that's what UseState allows us to do. It basically just allows us to change our elements values by using hooks, which is really useful and saves so much time because we don't actually have to select the elements and change the values by ourselves, and it's very helpful. So let's actually change this value to 0, and every time we click our video list, we're going to be adding 1 to our UseState. And there's actually a way to make this a lot simpler, so let's remove this whole function here. And what we could do is we're going to write UseState, or not UseState, but set state. And then here we're going to write state plus 1. And then here, every time we click our video list, we can see our element over here changing, and we're going to be adding 1 to our state by using our function set state every time we click our video list. So now that we know what UseState is and what it does, we have to remove the h1. So let's go ahead and remove this function. We also have to remove it from the element. Now let's create our UseState. So since we already have a value that's going to be equal to views, I'm going to just set this to vid views. And then the function is going to be set vid views, and that's going to be equal to UseState, and it's going to be equal to our views. Now what's going to happen is every time we click our video, so on click, what's going to happen is we're going to run a callback function, and then in that callback function we're going to set vid views to equal to vid views, so our value here which is actually equal to views plus 1. And then we have to set the views count here to equal to vid views. And now it should work. So we can see that every time we click our video, the views over here, it jumps by 1, which means that our use state works. And if it doesn't for you, then make sure that you check that you haven't written any errors. And we can see that over here, it's going to be adding 1 because I made it a string. So if we go down here, I can change that to 14,000 like this. And now if we click on it, we can see that it's going to increase since now it's a number. But yeah, so this is going to be the very basics of UseState. So we're going to create a search bar and can actually search for a video. So if we wanted the 4th video, we could just write 4 and then the 4th video is going to show up. So make sure you watch this whole video to not miss anything out. First thing that we need to do is add an input. So let's go to our video list. I'm going to cut this out. Let's create a new div. And then above the video list, we're going to create an input. So I'm going to go above it. Let's write input. And then let's set the class name to equal to search. Placeholder. Let's also do search. And then in the index.css, I've already added classes for the input. So we can see that that's what it looks like. And then when we fully open it, then it's going to be in the center. And if you want these styles, then you can go down the details and then find the GitHub repository to this course and then find the code for this project. But now let's go back here and let's add a new state so that we'll be able to compare the use state to the video titles. And then we're going to be able to make this functional. So let's go ahead and write const. I'm going to name it search and then let's write set search. That's going to be equal to UseState, and this is going to be blank for now because we have no text in here. And so in the input, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to add an onChange, and let's actually make a separate function just for now. So handle change. Here we're going to pass in the event, and here we're going to set search to equal to e.target.value. And onChange is going to be equal to the name of that function. And then we also have to set the value to equal to search. So now if we search something here, obviously nothing's going to happen. So let's actually console log search to see if it actually works. So let's go to our console. We can see that we get a few errors, which we're going to fix in a second. So if I write something, we can see that we're going to get the value from our input. Now for these errors, we can see that we need to add a key prop to our code, and it's going to be in our return here. So where it says video.map, here we're going to have to add a key to every single video. So let's go ahead and do that. We're getting a video, and every single video, so if we go to data, we can see that it doesn't have an ID, but we can use the views as an ID. So let's just write video.views, and we can see that the error disappears. And there's multiple ways in which we can do this, but I think the easiest way would be to go to our map method here. And then in our return here, we're going to set something similar to an if statement, which is going to say if search equals to something and the title of the video includes any text from the search, then we're going to return the video element. And I'm going to actually show you an example of what that would look like in a second. So let's actually move this whole function, and I'm just going to write it in here. So we have to get the event from our input here so that we can set search to equal to e.target.value. And then what I was going to show you is let's actually just set a variable. So I'm going to do let example equal to false. And then in here, when we return it, I'm going to say example equal to false, then we're gonna return the video. So right now we can see that we have all of the videos, but then if I set this to true, we can see that we're gonna have no videos because we set that if example equal to false, then we're gonna return the videos. Now what we could do is we could write or, which basically means that if example equals to false, then we're gonna return the videos. So now if we save, we can see that now the videos appear again. But then if I set this to false, we can see that they disappear. So there's multiple ways in which you can do this, and we can make this a bit longer. So we can do something like if example equals to false, and then also we can use search, and let's say search. I'm going to actually set this to equal to nothing, and if search, then we're going to return all of that. So we can see that we have nothing, but then if we set search to equal to something, so I'm just going to say ASD, then we can see that we're going to get all of the videos. So this is just the very basics. And so before we actually move on, I'm going to teach you a method which we're going to use, and it's called includes. So let's console log this includes method. So we're going to use the video.title here. So video.title, this method is called include. So we're going to write includes. We have to write some text, which is going to be search. And so we're using the text from the video. And this method checks if the text in the brackets has anything similar with the text from the video's title. So let's go in here, and we're going to get false because we have nothing in our state. And if you do have anything like this, then you should get true. So you can remove that, and we're going to get false. But then let's just say that I write something like 1. Then we can see that we're going to get 1 true and 3 false because we only have one video that contains 1 in its title. Now let's just say I write something like video. We should get false because right now it's checking for uppercase 2. So if I change the V to uppercase, then we can see that now it's going to be 4 trues because every single video has the word video in it. So to fix the uppercase thing, what we could do is go to our video.title, and we could write to lowercase and then add the round brackets, and now it should work even if I write video, and we can see that we get true. What we also have to do is, in case the person writes video like this, we can see that we get false, so we also have to do the same thing here. So search dot to lowercase, and now even if I write video with everything uppercase, we're gonna get true. So we have all of that fixed, and now we can actually use this. But before we do that, we're gonna have to write in a statement. So if search exists, then we're gonna have to return it a special way, else we're gonna return it normally. So let's go ahead and do that. And if search exists, then we're gonna have to write this whole thing inside of it, and we're gonna have to add the symbol to say and. So if this is true, then we're gonna return this video. And now we can see that everything works the exact same way. But then if I write something like, let's say 1, then we're gonna get only this one video because it contains 1, and then all of the other ones don't contain it. And we can see that if I remove everything, then it's going to go to this return, which is just going to return all the videos. But then when search actually equals to something, so let's say 3, then it's going to check here, and then it's only going to return the videos that contain the text that we have in our search, and then it's going to show it. And I'm going to show you just one more thing. So I'm going to make another input in here, and then let's just say that this one would be for channel name, just as an example. So I'm gonna change this to that. And so one thing they could do is obviously make another UseState, but a better thing to do is make one UseState with 2 variables, which means that that UseState is going to be an object. And yes, you can set UseState variables to be object, so this is how you do it. I'm gonna just name it inputs, and then let's write set inputs, but usually would have an actual name for the variable because that's not the best name. But in here we would have the name of each input. So we have a search input, which is actually going to be equal to this, and we also have a, I'm just gonna name it channel input, which is also going to be equal to nothing. I'm gonna go to the class name, and this should be search because I want it to look good, and then placeholder should be channel name, but since the value here is set to equal to search, then that's what it's going to say here. So let's set the values here to actually equal to the values from our inputs UseState. So the value here is going to be inputs dot search, and then on change, what we're going to do is set inputs. And so since it's an object, we don't want to delete the other object. So what we have to do is we have to write 3 dots, and we're going to set this to inputs, and the only object that we're going to change in this case will be the search, and we're going to set that to e.target.value, and we can say we get an error because this has to be in an object. And let me go over this again real quick. So we're setting inputs, and since it's an object, we don't want to erase the other object. So what we have to do is we have to write .inputs, which is going to say inputs to equal to what it was, but then we're changing the search to equal to the e.target.value. And we're going to do the exact same thing here. So set inputs, put this in an object. So, and then we're going to write inputs, and we're going to change the channel variable, and we're going to set that to e.target.value, just like that. And then we actually have to use the inputs UseEffect right over here. So we're going to write inputs.search, and then same thing right here. So inputs.search, and we can see that it's going to work the exact same way. So if I write 1, it's only going to show the first video. And you can actually do that by yourself, which I'm not going to go over because I don't want the video to be too long. So hopefully you learned a lot in this video. And now you also know how you can say a UseState variable to equal to an object, which is going to be pretty helpful in the future. And before I actually go over UseState or how we can actually write it, I'm going to go over what it is and show you an example of why we need it. And so UseState allows us to perform side effects in our components, and the most common examples would be fetching data from APIs or servers, and then also directly updating our elements here. So only updating a certain element instead of updating our whole turn here. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So if I console log render, and open our console here, you can see that we're going to get our first render, which would be showing our elements when we open the page. But then if I search something in our input here, we can see that we're going to get a re-render, because every time we update a hook, the whole function gets re-rendered, which means that also these elements will get re-rendered too. Now what if we had multiple hooks? So let's say I had another hook, which would be a stopwatch, and then here we're going to write UseState, and let's set that to 0. And so let's just say that this stopwatch would constantly work, or let's say that this would be the time, which would mean that it would update every minute or something like that. Let's actually make this work. So if I write set timeout, and then in here, let's run the callback function. And since we're going to be updating the stopwatch, the function gets re-rendered, which means that we don't need a constant loop here. So if I write set stopwatch, and then stopwatch +1, nothing's really going to happen. And let me actually console log that too. So stopwatch. Over here, we can see that every second we're going to be updating our stopwatch, but then since we're doing that, we're going to be re-rendering our whole page here, which means that if you have a lot of different elements, every time you would change a hook, your whole page would be updated, which you don't really want. And now let's go over the syntax for UseEffect. So you need to import it. So where you import UseState, you can add a comma and then write UseEffect, and then we're importing that from React. And the syntax would be you write UseEffect, and then in here we would have two values. So we have a function, and then we have a dependency. Now you can actually only write a function here, so let's start with that, and let's just console log render. And so what this would do is it would basically just console log on every single render. So let's uncomment this out. And we can see that it works the exact same way because we haven't added a dependency. Now, if we have an empty dependency, so we add a comma and we have to add these square brackets, it would only run on the first render, which means that it would only run once, and we can see that we're not going to get any more console logs. And the first render would be when our elements first load. And then the third option would be when we have a value in our dependency, which means that, let's just say in this example, I would console log only when the stopwatch, so stopwatch changes, and we can see that we're going to get a re-render. But then if I search something, we don't get a render for the search. And actually should have set this to search because it's changing every single second, but we're going to get our initial render, and we can see that we don't get any console logs. But then if I search something, we can see that we're going to get a render here, which means that this UseEffect will only run when our search value changes. And so there's multiple ways to use UseEffect. So let's just say that we wanted to add one to our stopwatch every time we search something. So this is just an example. Here we would write search, and then we could copy this. Let's actually just comment that out again, and then paste that in here. And we can see that we're going to get our first render, which would be 1. And if we search something, so if I write ABC, this would change to 4. And so that's a very simple example, but let's just say that if this would be the display for a calculator and you wrote something like 1 + 1, what you could do is you could add a UseEffect for that. But then if you didn't have a submit button or something similar to that, then you could use UseEffect, and then every time your display changes, you could check if you could actually get an answer for that. And if you can, then you could console log it. And that's just a very simple example. But you can do a lot of different stuff here. And so this is going to be the very basics of UseEffect, and you're not always going to need to use it because there's only specific moments where you will need to use them, and you'll know that when you get to them. And so this is going to be it for this React crash course. And if you want to learn how to clean up your code so we can see that it looks a bit different, in our index.js, we're going to be rendering app, which is going to be a separate file. And in here, we're going to be rendering 3 different files. So the navbar, video list, and then the footer. So if you want to learn how to clean up your code, then click at the very top right But this is where I'm going to end this video, so I really hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, then make sure to leave a like, subscribe so you don't miss upcoming React videos, comment down below if you get any errors, or if you'd like to see any specific React lessons, and hopefully see you in the next video.